Maya, what's happening in Texas makes not 1 ounce of sense. We have got another situation with ICE. We've got another situation with ICE. If you're saying it's similar to Renee Good, can you give us the lay of the land as you see and how we should be looking at this?
Yeah. So disturbingly, we have a father who was driving, and according to his family, his name is Mr. Sagrado Arujo, was apparently driving. He was going to pick up coworkers or workers to go to work, and somehow has now been killed by ICE. I say somehow only because we want to be very clear that we do not have all the facts. But here's the point from the family who says he had left his house in order to go pick up coworkers and go to work on a construction site. And now they find out he has been killed by ICE. Now, here's the thing. What ICE did was then tell us, the world, essentially the same thing that they said after they killed Renee Good in Minneapolis, right? We all remember this, but they claimed she rammed them and she had endangered their lives. And the video showed that the only lies were that from ICE trying to cover up what was none other than excessive force in its worst forms. In its worst forms, because it ended someone's life. And we have now the same claims with no evidence, no footage, and the family rightly calling for an investigation. And here's the other thing that is exactly the same pattern as Renee Good. ICE is essentially the Department of Justice, the people's lawyers are refusing to help and support also local law enforcement to investigate. This is not normal. It was not normal when they refused. You'll remember Keith Ellison, the Attorney General from Minnesota, demanding that they allow
State
them to do
Attorney
what they
General.
always do: cooperate and share information so there can be a determination whether state laws, criminal laws were violated by anyone, and to have that oversight as well as federal and the issue of federal law. So, what we're seeing here is a continued pattern to tell us what they want us to believe without any evidence, without any proof, and with a complete refusal to shut down the other oversight. I'm calling it independent oversight in the sense that it is independent of the federal government. It is still government. It is still government, but the district attorney in Houston is asking for people to share video and information, and essentially telling us that they're not getting cooperation from the federal government when one of their residents is dead. This is not normal, and it is not unusual for this administration to do something no other administration has done, which is refuse any form of transparency or accountability, even in the loss of a human being's life.
So, guys, we're talking to the great Maya Wiley. She is a lawyer and she is the CEO of the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights. And she knows of what she speaks. And looking at the chat, Maya, I'm seeing people saying, I don't trust ICE. And someone even brought up the fact that as we were talking about Renee Good and Minneapolis and Minnesota, guess what? They said the police lied in Minnesota about George Floyd, you know.
Hello.
Yeah, so this is crazy. So at the end of the day, there's profiling here. At the end of the day, it was a man who did not have identification. And a lot of us walk around with our driver's license, and sometimes we may not have a passport or other affirming information. Is that law? Do we have to have it?
Well, I'm with the great April Ryan, who knows how to ask the important questions, and is never afraid to. We have, not only is there no law requiring us to carry evidence and proof that we are citizens of this nation, we fought a civil war so that we didn't have to. That is
Mm,
exactly why we fought a civil war, because Black people were not allowed and not just Black people, let's be honest, there was a lot of discrimination against a lot of different groups, but of course, because of chattel slavery in
yeah.
particular, using that to say that we did not have the freedom to travel. So we also know apartheid South Africa, where I had the privilege of working in creating a criminal justice initiative after the end of apartheid. But we have to remember tyranny and apartheid was pass laws where people were required to carry a pass to prove that they had permission to be in their own communities. It was a way to control in the United States when we had slavery. It was a way for the Ku Klux Klan to control at the end and after slavery was traveling on the roadways, attacking people's freedom to travel. And what we are seeing from this administration is trying to normalize, even though there's no law. And if there was a law, we call it unconstitutional and we'd be challenging it in the courts. Let's be very clear. But there is no law that requires it of us. And in fact, they're violating our constitutional rights by suggesting we are being unlawful by simply going about our daily lives. And I just want to say this very clearly. This is trying to normalize tyranny. So, what you're talking about, April, is something that so many of us are feeling. What people are saying in the chat about not trusting ICE, sadly, is rational.
Mhm.
Because what people, I've shared this story and I'm going to share it again because it's personal. I mean, one of my best friend's sons, Morehouse grad, job,
Mm.
after the National Guard descends on Washington, D.C. and occupies and colonizes it, because that's the only thing I can call it, was terrified to simply go from his house to his job without carrying his passport. And that was so devastating.
And that's for Black people. Imagine our brown brothers and sisters.
Except and Asian American, Latino. And by the way, if you just have a really good tan and maybe some thick hair, because that's what racial profiling is. It's deciding you don't even look like you belong. If you're transgender in this country, you're under target. But this is the point, just for being who you are.
Yeah.
If there's no other primary freedom in any democracy, it's that the government cannot tell you who to be, how to identify, or tell you that you can't just participate in everyday life. And that's what they're trying to normalize is their ability to even control our behavior, our travel, and our identification.
Profiling, due process. Let's talk about due process. Typically, we're supposed to be able to have these questions adjudicated in a court of law. He didn't. This gentleman did not have the opportunity. Um,
Well, we don't even know if they had any probable cause to stop it. We don't know.
mm,
I mean, maybe they did. And this is the point. To people's point about trust, we should be able to trust. And we know as Black people, we haven't had this trust, but we should, as a people, be able to trust that if law enforcement, whether it's federal, state, or local, is stopping us, they're stopping us for a legitimate reason. Maybe the license plate on our car says that it's been stolen. Maybe we were swerving and ran a red light. Maybe there was some indication that a crime has been committed, or there is a warrant out for an arrest and they have reason to believe you are the person for whom the warrant is out for. All of those things are lawful.
yeah.
But the problem here is we're seeing people stopped and even harmed, detained. In some instances, we've had citizens deported, citizens or green card holders or people who are
American
told,
citizens.
right,
Yeah.
deported because unless you have due process, unless you have the requirement that the government jump through some hoops and prove that they have a right to do what they're doing, we do not have due process, and we don't know whether or not there was due process to even there was even a legal right to stop him. And if even if there was a legal right to take him in, what we have is a Trump administration that was firing. They've already fired about 200 immigration judges because they didn't like how they were ruling.
Yeah.
The other point about due process, the only reason it works is if we have an independent court system. The immigration judges have long been ones that immigrants' rights groups have complained about, by the way. So the fact that this administration doesn't like them when it's very hard to win immigration court cases, but they do serve an important function in saying, wait, you haven't demonstrated this person is deportable, or you haven't demonstrated this person isn't someone who should be having asylum, or you haven't demonstrated that they have to be held in a deportation center, because that's also a violation of due process rights if you haven't fully adjudicated the case and unless you have reason to detain them. And we have a 3-year-old child being detained in New York City right now. Brad Lander, who is now Brad Lander, Congressmember-elect, has just posted about this. Who are we? And why do we not care about fundamentally whether or not the government has some checks and balances on whether they can violate our rights?
So I want to move on to Todd Blanche, but before I move on to Todd Blanche, this is not just a black or brown issue. I want our white friends and Americans to understand that Renee Good was not black or brown, right? Alex Preddy was not black or brown. Guys, this is not just in one or two groups.
People who are being charged with the crime, it's not a crime, but who are in for this Department of Justice, just to move to Todd Blanche, we've seen this department, I'm calling it the Department of Injustice or the Department of Just Trump, depending on the day. But I would argue those are interchangeable. But here's the thing. What we have seen is people who are engaged in protest are being criminally charged now.
Yeah.
Charged with crimes of protest. It's exactly why we have so it does come for everyone. And I also want to remind people, you may be Jewish, you may just be tan easily and have a natural glow because you're Italian American. What racial profiling does is say you don't look like you belong, and it doesn't just impact Black people or Latinos. And to your point, the point is to say nobody has rights. We can tell everyone what to do, but we'll start with the people who are most vulnerable to having their rights violated, to get permission. And they're using this for anybody white who's even trying to say, wait, you don't get to do that to people. And we have the right to say, we don't like it, we don't want you to do it, as long as we're doing it peacefully and we're not violating the law.